perspective, I've been really encouraged over the work of the Architects Association for the last 2 years. I think the messages that I've certainly been interested in my last 20 years or so in government or in the States are starting to kind of trickle through. In some ways, people either characterise me as being kind of too far out there, kind of ahead of my time, or perhaps kind of not wanting to make decisions. But I like to think of myself as somebody who's interested in architecture, housing, and the social infrastructure, if we can put it that way. To an extent that if I can do anything within my ministerial powers, that's the type of thing that I should be wanting to do. So I'm in a lucky position to be able to seek to influence as far as I'm able to, and I think the message is starting to be delivered. I'm not going to claim credit that I'm the one who's actually kind of delivered this, but I think it's more a general response on behalf of the public everywhere to urban living. Everybody knows that if we're going to pick up on sustainability and saving the planet and all of the really kind of meaty kind of, for some people, boring things, because they start to get a little bit black and bleak and all the rest of it, if you don't play your part. All of those things are perhaps kind of not worth worrying about. But for me, the meat and drink of encouraging kind of an urban regeneration is to excite people, or to get people excited through events such as these, as to the possibilities of urban living. And urban living, for me, doesn't just characterise being pleasantly surprised at the outside form of a building. It's about how the buildings work. It's about how we live our lives socially within them. And more importantly, how we actually use the outside space where the buildings are grouped together into collective kind of groups, which we call towns or villages, or even just kind of minute settlements. And in that respect, I mean, I think the advances for the sustainability movement are starting to become apparent. I noticed that there seems to be less and less kind of pitch roofs, which I think is fine, more green roofs, rainwater harvesting schemes, and photovoltaic panels and solar panels and all the rest of it starting to be built in as a de rigueur kind of constraint, if you like, to the architectural offerings that are expressions of the way people want to live. And I think that's really good. Some of my colleagues wouldn't actually kind of get as excited about green roofs as I do, but then again, if you've never had a green roof and don't aspire to one, I suppose you can't get that excited. The other broad thing I just wanted to mention is that from my background previously, I was in computing as well as mathematics, and certainly two things are starting to happen in that regard which are of interest to the architectural profession, and indeed all of those other professions that rely on architecture. And that is the ability of mathematical programs and computers to actually begin to solve some of the more exotic kind of space forms that I find incredibly stimulating. This is starting to be picked up as well by people wanting to actually live by the donning of a helmet or whatever, kind of more exotic lives. And instead of taking our holidays at Green Island, as I generally do as a good Jerseyman, or somewhat further afield in the Caribbean, instead of having to go and pay your way to hop on a plane and kind of produce all of your carbon kind of non-credits and everything else, there's more and more kind of stimulating opportunities to don a helmet, take on a personal kind of representation as a computer avatar, and to actually experience what it's like living inside some of these more exotic houses. One of the categories that we don't have at the moment, but I think it's only a question of time, and certainly by the end of the next 2-year period, I will certainly hope to see it as a regular part of this presentation, will be perhaps to have Sim Jersey or Sim City, because we haven't got city status as yet, Sim Jersey presentations where perhaps architects and developers could get together, and we could all perhaps don the computer helmet and walk through some of these more exotic forms as to how the buildings might be developed in town or further afield without actually having to pay the very expensive planning fees. So in one way I'm probably doing the department out of a whole load of revenue, but I think for the experience that people could actually undertake by doing these things, it would bring benefits that are in a way that can't properly be represented by just looking at the wonderful pictures and the diagrams that we've got up here today. So as a regular SimCity fan and computer buff and all the rest of it, I'm hoping that this could be a way of taking architecture further into everybody's minds and hearts, and perhaps coming together to properly regenerate the town in ways that we haven't yet kind of considered. So that's probably enough to me. I can see people fidgeting, so I think there's no more to say than to welcome you all again to this important event. To thank all of the hard work that's gone into the presentations that have been made, to actually signify that there are a couple of categories that are particularly controversial depending on how people vote. I mean, there is a public vote that people can make to determine which of the representations that are on show are the best. But for me, I think the more controversial one is the scheme for the best unbuilt scheme. And perhaps, controversially, some of those who think that Plemore shouldn't be built may be voting for that one. But we'll wait and see. So without further ado, I'd like to again welcome you all to the event, urge you to stay on to listen to the excellent presentation that you're about to have from Chris Patrick, and to open the design exhibition, and urge you to vote. Thank you for coming, and it's open.